The basic premise is he's on fire. If anybody's played, we've back to the NBA Jam days, video game days. NBA Jam. If you made 3 baskets in a row without letting the other team score, you were on fire. So anybody that's made a couple shots in a row, they're on fire. So if you made 3, great albums in a row, we're counting that as on fire. So that's kind of the basic idea. They don't have to be completely front to back albums, but I tried to pick ones that were for the most part. There are some that are even 4 and 5, which is a whole different stratosphere. But 3 is harder than you think. I'm looking through some of the groups that I love and come back to regularly. I'm like, oh man, they kind of had a misstep here. They only had 2, and then they had 2 more, or they had 2, and then they had 3 more after that. But yeah, it's not the easiest feat to pull off.
And so. I think it was someone I think it was in the comments of our Instagram post, because we kind of put a teaser out there in the last week. I think it was there where someone made a good comment. It's like there are some bands that don't even have 3 total. So it's hard to even get 3 total, let alone in a row, because, like Tony said, there's a misstep in there, whether it's changing sound, changing fan base, label influence, all that. So to come
sophomore slump.
Sophomore slump. So to hit it 3 in a row, it's rare. And I really tried to pick 3 that are great.
All right, Nate, what's your last one?
Yeah, I'm anxious and curious to hear yours, because you have so much you could pull from.
I mean, I have a bunch written here, and I almost like, in a weird way, I'm like kind of preserving and like going like heavy hitters and like kind of going deeper like later on.
Just pick one. You got this. I have faith, because we'll do this again.
Yeah. This one's kind of a mainstream band, so a lot of people know this one, but they've been around forever, and they're really big, but the comeback for this was, I don't know what it is. Definitely, for me, it's the guitarist. But when the Red Hot Chili Peppers returned in '99 with Californication, I had heard, me and my brother were obsessed with Blood, Sex, Trigger Magic. And so I had kind of an early, luckily for my brother, introduction to Chili Peppers. But they weren't doing shit for a long time, and they definitely weren't coming to Maine. So I was stuck on those early '90s Chili Peppers albums, and there was a dry spell, and then they had their mishaps behind the scenes, so there was not a whole lot of touring action, at least in the Northeast. And Californication came out, and I didn't even know really much of the history, because I was so young that all I cared about was what sounded good, and I wasn't really geeking out on why things sounded good. And a lot of the Chili Peppers success and stadium rockers and just status that they're at is, unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at it, is very much attributed to the guitarist John Frusciante, who's not even the original guitarist. So he returned for Californication, and the licks on that album, licks is slang for guitar riffs.
I think if they've made it this far, they probably
tasty licks, tasty,
so tasty, man.
I read something. I want to take credit for this, but I'm not going to. I don't want to plagiarize. I read some review on his guitar line being one that Frusciante's guitar riffs, because there's such a interesting melody that it puts your brain into almost like a trance. So Scar Tissue, has one of those riffs where it's man, it's so peaceful and clean, but kind of makes me pause for a second. So when that album came out, we were young, so we were, I guess we were in 8th grade going into high school. So it's kind of I'm in place again, It's working at my our family's summer camp on Sebago Lake, doing some renovation with my brother, and that single came out, and I was just hooked. I was I love the melodic soundscapes of just this riff, and I cannot wait for this album to come out. And I already love the Chili Peppers, so kind of like the 9 Inch Nails thing earlier we were alluding to, I was already stoked on the band. So this new stuff's coming out, and it's completely different, but I was kind of a little bit more well versed on different styles of music at this point, kind of like the food thing we were talking about earlier, different styles. And this was more of a melodic, Anthony Kiedis is singing on this song instead of rapping and funky stuff as much. And I just loved it. So yeah, I got into this album, it dropped. And Twan, the songs that came off this album, obviously Scar Tissue, Californication, The singles are great, but the deep cuts on this album are obviously epic. Tone, do you have anyone on that one?
Well, I put last week we talked about kind of half mentioned the Chili Peppers, and I put a Chili Pepper song on the playlist that I loved as a deep cut, Parallel Universe.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Such a great flea part too. Like that bass line is just awesome.
Yeah.
And like he really kind of shines there on that that track. So that's one. For me, obviously, everybody knows Other Side, Californication. Those songs.
This
are
Velvet
huge.
Glove.
Yep.
This Velvet Glove. I was gonna say This Velvet Glove and Road Trippin' are my favorite songs.
Road
of the album.
Yep.
And
Road Trippin's one of my favorites.
Super deep cuts, but they're like such great songs.
This Velvet Glove, probably the top 2 songs on that album. Top 3.
Yep, I would agree. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think we mentioned Rick Rubin earlier. This was a Rick Rubin run actually with this album and the 2 after. But yeah, man, I became like hooked again. It was kind of like a Third Eye Blind thing where like it was such a long break and then it came back and I was like, oh, this is awesome, and I can't wait to go, head first in this. Yeah, so that led right into By the Way, which is actually, to be completely frank, that's my favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers album, and actually holds a place in my favorite albums of all time, because I got in such a rhythm of just really amazing melodic sounds, and I almost want to attribute this to John Frusciante. Is just like, man, you can make such amazing sounds with a guitar, and you can do things that kind of transcend everything, and really just have you just pause. You kind of just I meditate on it. I love those riffs so much that I'm just like, man, this makes me so happy and calm and grateful for everything I have. It's like a weird like meditation thing. But By the Way, just the album's so good, and it's just the singing and the songwriting again kind of goes back to my construction projects and stuff at our family's estate, and playing these albums pretty consistently, to be completely honest. Like maybe wearing them out too much. A lot of people give the Chili Peppers shit because it's like a lot of it is the same sounds and so forth. But if you're locked into that for whatever time frame, it's because that's what tastes good at the time, and you're like, oh man, I really like this sound. I really like Frusciante. I could listen to this guy play guitar for hours because it's so blissful. So yeah, By the Way just goes down as one of my absolute favorite albums. Like everything on that Zephyr song, Can't Stop. So another weird kind of album with rhythms and so forth. But
Venice Queen. I love Venice Queen. The closing track. Such a good song. Don't Forget Me is a great song too.
Yep. Venice Queen. Good call. Minor Thing. I really like Minor Thing. Kind of more of an up-tempo song on the album, but I Could Die For You. Don't Forget Me actually is one of my favorites because the sequence of that song. And that, this all led into the third of this kind of on fire streak, which is Stadium Arcadium. And it was clearly just a reunion with someone that was in the band, had quit. So John was in for Blood, Sex, Sugar, Magic, was really the album that like launched the Chili Peppers to superstardom. So when he quit, they kind of took I don't really know how to say this nicely. They kind of took a dip, I guess you'd say, band dynamics and everything. So when John came back, it was like a rebirth / getting the OGs back together, even though he wasn't the original guitar. So it's really ironic, but it takes trial and error to get the perfect fit. And Stadium Arcadium is just another one of those albums where it's just like, man, clearly John was just on fire in his own right, because he's just writing all this amazing music and presenting it to the band, and they can just layer on top of these amazing riffs because they're just standalone on him. I give so much credit to him because I feel like he really defines them as what they are, and without him, they just really are not the same. So yeah, songs on this one, I think everyone knows Danny California and Snow. It's kind of some singles, but again,
can I interject real quick on Danny California?
For sure, yeah.
They had to pay Tom Petty for that. You know that, right?
Yeah.
No,
it sounded like Last Dance of Mary Jane. He was like, "Hey, does this not sound just like Last Dance of Mary Jane?" Just saying, guys, not looking for money, just saying it's the same riff, and they ended up giving him royalties for it.
Wow, I'll listen to that. I didn't know about that.
Yep.
There's been a lot of Tom Petty ripoffs. Sam Smith,
Yeah, he did. Yep. Won't back down. Come on, dude. Sounds the same.
It probably wasn't Tom. It was probably his management that was like, "Oh, we can get this."
The story's cool. I think he was like, "I'm not looking for cash. I just want you guys to know that this is my riff first." Petty, wherever you are, man, you are the fucking badass, dude. I love Petty.
Oh, man, one of my favorites for sure. Yeah. So this third album I think I had a feeling it was gonna kind of come to a close because they were riding this wave for quite a while. And as much as I love the band, you can only do so much of something for so long in like the same kind of repetition. Even though this kind of had a crescendo effect in a way, like got better and better. Although, by the way, kind of still is my favorite. But yeah, songs on here like Slow Cheetah, Wet Sand is, man, I love that fucking song.
Was that a double album?
Yep,
it was, and it actually worked for a double album. Usually it's too many songs, but I feel like this one's got its moments.
It's hard to pull off for sure. Hard to concentrate. It's one of my favorites.
Outside of the singles, I never heard this album.
Go
check out Storm in a Teacup. That song is awesome.
Oh yeah. Actually, you know what? That's a good point. That this album, the singles, it's not their fault, but the singles got way overplayed, and might have turned people away from this album. It's actually a really solid piece of work, but I think the radio industry, terrestrial radio at the time was, they would just kill things to death with singles. So it really kind of almost tarnished this album because it's a really solid front to back album. I actually skip through the singles a lot of the times because it's like so like, okay, I remember this almost too much. But yeah, it was a sweet spot for the band. I think they were in a good time frame collectively, creativity wise, and they were just killing it. But
Warlock's another cool non-single track.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of funky. Those are two kind of funky flea songs too, which kind of helps.
Yeah. I think, and to close this, I think the reason I really liked this kind of 3 album run is obviously the songs are really solid, and they've made some good stuff before and after it. But it was because I've always liked the slower songs. So when like we were talking about Soul to Squeeze on another episode, like that's like a slow jam, and I'm like, oh, this is like my favorite Chili Peppers song, or it was at the time. So when they made these 3 albums that kind of had a lot of those elements pretty heavy on those 3, I was like, oh, nice. This is what I really like about this band. I actually prefer that stuff than the crazy, funky, hybrid songs that they have. I really like the melodic, slow stuff. So yeah, had to throw that in there and it actually goes with the Queens of the Stone Age thing because they toured together and have a lot of similarities with Southern California thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chili Peppers.
Yeah, that's a good 3 album run. I actually, in doing this, they were on my list, but I have another list going that I'll bring up at another time for you guys. I think it'd be a good thing to tease bands that didn't quite make it, and I actually thought that they didn't quite make it. But that's maybe because it's the double album. I feel like if they strip that down to one album, they absolutely make it for me. But it is a really good. I mean, for a double album, it's damn good. It's way better than it should be for 28 songs. So I would agree. That's a pretty good pickup there, Nate.
So you would have pegged them at a He's Heating Up 2 in a row?
Yes. Oh, definitely. I mean, you can't touch Californication, and by the way, those are
I'm with you.
Oh, those are masterpieces. And I mean,
One Hot Minute.
One Hot Minute's got some moments, but it's not as good. That's Dave Navarro. Yeah. One Big Bomb is a cool song though. Check that one out. But yeah, it's not the same. And Frusciante's now back. They kind of gave Josh the boot and brought John back, and I'm excited for that, just because not that I didn't like the last 2 albums, but they're not as good. And you're right. I think a lot of what works for them is John, is Frusciante's guitar playing and the way that he melds things together with Flea, and the way that it all sounds with Anthony over the top of it. Like it's, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, he's very much although not original, he made that band go from, some kind of funky project to like, no, we're going to be like a Led Zeppelin status band, which is really cool. And yeah, I could literally just listen to everything on silent and just hear John's guitar work and be happy. And I think that's why I throw Stadium as like that 3 on Fire, because I just want to listen to as much stuff that he writes as possible,
Yep.
And it takes the band, because his solo stuff's okay, but he really needs to be. He's a band. He should always know that he's better with a band.
Yeah.
He can't do it all. So. Yeah.
That was a good poll.
That
was a great
yeah.
poll.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that wraps us up for tonight. We have plenty more, and we'll do this segment again for sure. But I think that's a good spot to stop. We each had two good ones, two big ones for the three of us, and they'll be fun making the playlist this week for sure.
Absolutely.